Everyone, this is going to be 14.4, A War on Two Fronts. We're going to start with a quote from Karl von Clausewitz, who is a military philosopher who said back in the late 1800s that war is simply a continuation of politics by other means. And I compare that to my grandfather, who was a medic on board a battleship in the Pacific in World War II, who said that war is weeks of boredom followed by seconds of sheer terror. Our objectives: we're going to analyze the reason for and impact of the Allies' Europe First strategy. We're going to explain why the battles of Stalingrad and Midway were major turning points in the war. And we're going to discuss how the Allies put increasing pressure on the Axis in North Africa and finally in Europe. So we're going to start with the Allied strategy here. Once America got into the war after Pearl Harbor, we had to decide where we were going to go first and who we were going to attack. Do we attack Japan and get revenge for Pearl Harbor, or do we attack Germany, who declared war on us and who may have been the larger, more credible threat, possibly? And so the Allies thought that Germany was the more dangerous one, and we wanted to attack, like in France, somewhere on the Western Front. Stalin also really wanted us to do this because it would take the pressure off Russia. However, we planned to attack Germany as well, but we weren't quite ready yet, and so we were more focused on Japan, at least in the early months of the war. So, looking at the European front first, America helped to defend ships in the Pacific Ocean, but Russia basically had to defend itself for a good chunk of time, even after we had joined the war. Early on in 1941, Hitler had actually sneak attacked Russia. He had been allied with Russia at the time, but he had attacked while they weren't expecting it. And this really caused a lot of anger towards Germany from the USSR. Eventually, the push into Russia was stopped at the Battle of the Siege of Stalingrad. Basically, Stalin trapped the Germans there for over a year, encircled them, and a lot of people starved to death and froze to death. It was not a pretty picture in Stalingrad. Soldiers and civilians were thrown at the Germans until basically they were out of bullets almost. And then when the winter came, it got even worse. The German defeat at Stalingrad and the retreat basically ended Hitler's invasion of Russia, and that meant that the Allies could focus more on Germany and the Western Front. However, a lot of historians say that, as important as the Western Front was, Hitler's defeat in Russia was it was the end of the war, basically. I mean, that was the turning point for Germany. So here's just one picture of the Battle of Stalingrad. Meanwhile, America and England wanted to attack the Nazis in France, but we were not ready to go to France yet. We had to do a massive buildup of war material. So instead, we attacked through North Africa, fought the Nazis in Africa, and from North Africa went up Sicily into Italy. The American general Dwight Eisenhower became the leader of the Allied forces during this time, and he helped push into Italy during that time as well. So here's Dwight Eisenhower, who said, "I hate war as only a soldier who has lived it can, only as one who has seen its brutality, its futility, its stupidity." So we eventually were able to get the Axis powers on the defensive by doing this, pushing them back. They're not spreading outward anymore, they're defending inward. The Axis powers were being pushed back in Italy and in North Africa, and Roosevelt basically said, "We are only going to accept your surrender, full surrender, no terms, nothing like that, unconditionally." Italy surrendered in 1943. Mussolini was executed actually in 1945, but the Germans did not give up Italy until 1945. Meanwhile, we were bombing Germany and German-held territory with our own aircraft, including many different fighter groups, which was a very dangerous job. And that included an all-African-American fighter group called the Tuskegee Airmen out of Alabama. Here are just a few of them. Now, that is in Europe. Let's look at turning points in the Pacific. In the Pacific, we were able to defeat the Japanese at the Battle of Midway. We actually figured it out thanks to we broke their codes, and that was an important point. But the Battle of Midway was when the Japanese stopped advancing and started retreating, and it meant that we could start attacking them through what was basically called island hopping at the time. Um, Japan was on the defensive, and we were moving slowly from island to island, taking over each small island occupied by the Japanese, and then moving to the next island. This is called island hopping, or sometimes called leapfrogging. And it was really hard to do because the Japanese really did not believe in surrender. It is not part of their culture basically, and so moving from island to island cost lives. It cost time. It was a deadly situation, basically. So here are some ships from the Battle of Midway. And here is what island hopping looked like. If you follow the red lines in there, you can see that we're moving from island to island, getting closer and closer to Japan each time. And finally, we were right on the verge of going to Japan, and we had to decide, are we going to attack them and do a full frontal assault, or are we going to bomb them from above? And we ended up using the second one and using the atomic bomb.